Imagine, if you will, the grand arc of human history, stretched across the millennia, from the ancient wilds to our present cities, humming with electricity and ideas. There's a common mistake we make when telling this story, one that attributes our current glory to the philosophers, the priests, the poets, those who sat beneath the olive trees or stood in the temples, gazing towards some imagined higher purpose. This mistake, while romantic, is utterly wrong. If we're going to credit anyone for the stupendous feat that is human intelligence, we should not look to Athens, nor to Rome, nor to any other glittering metropolis of classical imagination. We must instead look to the farmer. It was the farmer, that unassuming tiller of soil, who actually set us on the path to becoming the creatures we are today. Creatures capable of theorizing about quantum physics, peering into black holes, or contemplating the very nature of existence. This wasn't a matter of elegant argument or grand vision, but rather a matter of necessity. It was about staying alive and, crucially, outdoing one's neighbor in that effort. You didn't need to be the wisest or the noblest to secure your place in the long chain of history. No, you had to be smart enough to out-reproduce the family over the next hill. And the key to that, the sharpest weapon in that quiet struggle for survival, was an understanding of the land and the demands of farming that was nothing short of genius. Think back to the dawn of agriculture. Picture those early humans transitioning from foraging across vast landscapes to sticking their stakes into one patch of earth. This wasn't a small change. It was a revolution, and one that demanded a kind of thinking that the world had never seen before. Suddenly the game was no longer just about today, what you could gather, what you could hunt. It was about tomorrow, next season, next year. It was about anticipation, strategy, and getting it right, or else watching everything you worked for wither away. You could no longer afford to be merely reactive. You had to plan, to scheme, to think beyond the here and now. The early farmer didn't have spreadsheets or written records. There were no numbers scrawled on parchment to help calculate yields or understand weather patterns. But that farmer knew how much water was needed and when. They knew which soils yielded the best harvests and which fields needed rest. They knew when to plant and when to harvest. This was a complex mental dance of estimation and timing, of keeping track of dozens of invisible variables and finding just the right balance between them all. It was, in short, the birth of everything that would one day become mathematics. Not the formalized mathematics of textbooks and equations, but the raw, embodied form of calculation that dictated survival. And here is where the story gets interesting. Success in farming wasn't about getting it right once. You didn't just plant a seed and cross your fingers. You repeated this process year after year, experimenting, observing, refining. Your survival and the survival of your children depended on your ability to manage this balance better than anyone else. And this, my friends, is the true origin of our capacity for abstract thought, for complex reasoning. The man or woman who could see the subtle signs of a drought coming, who knew to plant a different crop to survive the year, who outproduced their neighbors, that person was rewarded, not with accolades or laurels, but with more offspring. And those offspring, in turn, inherited not just the knowledge of farming, but the very ability to think about the world in the systematic, deeply analytical way that farming required. Thus, farming didn't just feed us, it selected us. It chose who among us would pass on their traits, not just the hard-working and physically strong, but the ones who could see the bigger picture, who could calculate risks, make plans, understand complex relationships between seemingly unrelated things. These were the people who prospered, who multiplied, who became the ancestors of all of us sitting here today. What's often missed in our reverence for ancient scholars and myth-makers is that they were merely standing on the foundation laid by those nameless early farmers. Plato's cave, Pythagoras' theorem, Euclid's geometry. None of it would have existed without the prior 10,000 years of agricultural struggle, without the slow accumulation of insights into how to manage and manipulate nature. It was agriculture that first demanded that we see the world not as a chaotic force to be survived, but as a system to be understood, to be optimized. The first human who worked out how to use irrigation to turn a desert patch into fertile land was, in a real sense, doing something more complex and profound than any philosopher ever did. They were turning an unpredictable world into something manageable, something predictable, using nothing but their wits and their will. The consequence? A gradual but undeniable rise in human intellectual capability. Farming favored the clever, the ones who could optimize, maximize, and strategize. It demanded long-term thinking, and it directly rewarded those who were best at it by giving them more children who would then carry those same tendencies forward. Over countless generations, the constant honing of these mental tools led to the emergence of minds capable of grappling with problems far beyond the fields. Minds that could envision the unseen, quantify the unquantifiable, predict the unknowable. And make no mistake, it wasn't the priests or the poets who laid the groundwork for this evolution. It was the one who had to calculate yield without arithmetic, the one who had to balance the health of the soil without formal chemistry, the one who had to anticipate the weather without meteorology. Farming demanded a mental sophistication that is almost unimaginable in its depth and breadth, and it forged us into a species that could reason through layers of complexity. We like to think that writing or formal education gave rise to abstract thought, but these were merely the tools that helped formalize what was already there, buried deep in the furrows of fields planted millennia ago. So the next time we toast the glories of human achievement, let us not forget who truly set us on this path. Let us raise our glass not to Athens or Rome, not to the great libraries or universities, but to the anonymous millions whose relentless pursuit of a better harvest sharpened the human mind. Farming, with all its demands, with all its tedium and toil, forged our ability to grasp the abstract, to see through the immediate and into the long term. It was the ultimate test, a test not just of strength, but of intellect, and it ensured that those who could think a little further, who could solve problems a little faster, would be the ones to thrive. And here we are, the descendants of those shrewd survivors, now capable of looking out into the cosmos, of breaking down the subatomic, of pondering the meaning of existence itself. All of it, comes back to the ancient fields and the farmers who worked them, not because they wanted glory, but because they needed to eat, to survive, to outdo their neighbors, and in the end, to ensure that their children would inherit the earth.